Hi, good morning. We're going to kind of go over this morning. I bought a lathe about a year ago, and I've just had so much fun with it. It's just a blast. But one of the things is, of course, I don't have a ton of room, so I want to be able to take it away because it's in my way during regular woodworking projects, but sometimes I use it for both. So anyway, I just did a video about my Harbor Freight hydraulic table, and I have that set up right now, and you can kind of see part of it. I keep the lathe on the table, but it slides right off, so I can slide it on my one of my new workbenches or my router table out of the way, and then I can put other things on it and move them around. So I'm going to show it to you now. One of the things is I have a box on the back of it. It sits on kind of a MDF that I've put some melamine stuff on top, contact cemented it on so that it's easy to clean, because a lot of times you're using some kind of oil, walnut oil or something that's getting all over it, and you can wipe it down. I put a box on the back to hold chisels and a lot of turning tools, some of my parts and pieces for the chucks and that sort of thing. What I did first is I made a kind of just one that I was not going to use. I made it out of 1/2-inch MDF and mounted it on there, and used that for a month or so, and realized the failings of it and where it needed to be height-wise, depth-wise, how much room I needed in between the lathe and it, and how high I could go and be reasonable. And I also wanted dust collection, so I made a track for a shroud holder to go on, and you'll see that. So I've actually done this more than once, and I suggest if you build yourself something like this, even if you make it on just a regular table, that's stationary, is take and make your box with your drawers in it for all your stuff that goes with it, easy access. Make something temporary first and see how it all works out, and then build yourself a decent one. And even though I used for the one that's permanently on there now, I used Baltic birch, but most of it was pieces left over from things. So there's probably some little gouges and things in it here and there, but it works really well. So here it is. I'm going to pull it out from where I normally store it under a bunch of cabinets, and normally I'll pull it out in the middle of the room and get it up and get it ready to use. I can use it quickly by not connecting a bunch of the things that are on it. I think we're up high enough that you can see this thing, hopefully. Let me look real quick. Yeah, it looks like everything is in sight. Get my cords out of the way. I have a light that I got that I mount on this thing. These are the blocks I made that mount on the side. You can see they just have a couple of screws that mount on the sides and hold my tools when they're in use. Some of these holes are bigger than the others, depending on the tool. Some of them are oblong for some bigger turning tools, and also a wrench and a hammer and things like this. This is off to the right, and I will actually, I better get out the correct, yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's that one, and then I've got a little magnetic tray that I keep on here, and I put a piece of steel on the top of this box so that I can put screws and things on here, and if they're magnetic. Here's a couple of trays that I made. These are a good idea to do. It's just that what is it, DLP, whatever, stuff on top, some scrap pieces, and they saddle over the bed of the lathe. That way when I'm doing finish work, you can see how dirty these are, but I can just scrape them off real fast and easy. And that way you don't get all that all over the bed of the lathe or the bed of the table. So those are very handy for that. Then this light, I really like this. In fact, I use the same light on my slow turning grinder. And it is magnetic, and it sits on that piece of steel. And I'll show you that stuff closer later. This is the first one I made for holding the tools. You can see it's got a fin on it. And what that's for is to actually pull the table in. There's on the side of the table here is inside an insert that down below I've got a knob that'll screw in and actually hug this thing and square it off to the table so it doesn't move once I get going. So this is usually the first one that I mount on the top part, and you probably, I don't know if you can see all of this part, and I probably should speed it up if you can't. Let me see if I can turn this a little bit just to get a better idea of what I got there. So I'm going to go ahead and screw this into, I have inserts in this, and remember, this thing slides off of here. This part right in here is just sitting on top of this kind of fake table I made for the hydraulic table to get me another 3.5 inches. So what it is underneath this is 2x4s all the way around, and it sits on the actual table itself and gives me 3.5 inches plus 3/4 for the 3/4 inch plywood on the top. So anyway, that puts that on there. Then what happens is I've got a knob here that goes on the side, and I just spin that baby on. It's going into one of the 2x4s that has an insert in it. And once I tighten this, it actually, if it isn't square to the end, it shifts over or goes that way and gets itself all squared up. And it won't move when I'm using the lathe on the top of the table, because the bottom of this is really slick. The bottom of that board, it has some more of this white stuff. Usually it's just MDF. But if I remember, I'd have this white stuff, melamine or whatever, underneath, and it just slides off really easy. So anyway, let's get it back over to the actual lathe. So this other end now I can put on, and it's pretty fast and easy. I mean, it basically kind of, I cut it to fit in here, and there's just 2 screws holding it, and they're very adequate. You can see that I have blocks under the lathe, so that because what happened is well, I don't remember what happened, but I wanted them up on the blocks for some reason. I think it was so I could get more height on this box on the back. So anyway, that's that. Okay, so that's on there. Now what I'll do is I'll turn this around to show you the back. Also, you can see I have notches. Well, maybe you can see. I have notches in... see if we can get that up higher. It's hard for me to see everything there, but there's notches in here and here. That's so that it goes down the handle, and so I can put this up and down with these boards on it. So anyway, let's get this turned around. Now this is just a MIDI lathe. It's not the great big style lathe. I think we're in there. Let's see if I can get out of the way. Anyway, so here is this is for dust collection, which is really handy. And what I use is a big shroud like this, 4-inch connection, and it out of the way. It sits in here, and then I tighten it down, but I can slide it. So depending on what I'm turning, and sometimes even part of the turning is inside of this, and I can move it farther away. And I have another shroud that's smaller that I can bring back farther if it's more in the way. But you know something, this never gets in my way. I sometimes have to move it over this way or over this way, but that's about it. So anyway, that's what that track is for, and it works really well. So here is my drawer system. Now, the one I had before, this drawer here was not as tall. It was shorter, and I think that's why I raised the bed, is I wanted more room in this drawer, because I went to a bunch of garage sales and bought a whole bunch of different tools and gouges and that sort of thing, and then sharpen them all up, clean them all up, and so I have, it'll take me a while, I'm sure, but I'll figure out eventually which ones I like and don't like. But it's full of tools, and I will get a closer view. And then I have a short little box in this end that has my just different parts and pieces. There's all kinds of stuff in here, and like I said, the gouges, they can just fit right in there, and if you have a bunch of different ones, you can measure and just make some miscellaneous holes. And I have smaller holes for things like this thing is getting full. I have smaller holes for other parts and pieces, like your part for pushing stuff out and so on. And I can line this up with tools. What I do is, on my left side, I do more bowl and more. I have spindle tools and bowl tools, where on this side I have my bigger tools. So I'll have, and they're actually probably down at the bottom here, but I have some 1-inch bowl, flat bowl gouges that are curved for getting way inside, but they're real thick steel, and so on. So those are very handy. There's no drawer glides on this or anything. Now the bottom drawer, I take out, and you can kind of see in there parts and pieces, and I set that over on a table, and it's out the whole time I'm using the lathe. And then I just take my air hose under this if any stuff gets in there, but it just slides right on the top of the board in, so I didn't waste any room for making a nice drawer. And some leftover handles from some other project that I didn't use. So the light going on top, again, like I said, I'm going to shut this off and I'll carry the camera over and kind of show you, but I just screwed on a piece of metal on the top here, so I can put any of these things that are magnetic on the top. This really works well, and what I really like is I can adjust my height. There are times when I want it lower, when maybe I'm working on something really fine, like using spalted wood for a pen, where I've really got to be careful and I'm just right down in there. And other times when I'm up there working on a bowl, and I finally got into doing some segmented things, and I've made a bunch of different devices for checking depth and done a lot of bowls. If you don't have a lathe, you got to get one. It is so much fun. And if you don't have one yet, but you're thinking about getting one, keep an eye at garage sales. You'll find gouges and chisels that just need to be sharpened. And you might get them for $5 a piece, and some of them are $80, $90 new. And literally, once you sharpen them, they're just as good as the new one, unless they're, a real low-grade steel or something like a Harbor Freight gouge or something like that. And even then, you just have to sharpen them more, and it gets you good at sharpening. So anyway, I'll shut it off, and then I'll give you what I do with the dust collection. Whoops. Is this comes off my drum sander, and I usually have the lathe here, and this goes into that shroud that I showed you, and it just works great. It's very nice. And then when I'm done with this, down it goes. And if I'm using it and I'm doing some hybrid stuff where I'm actually doing some woodworking, but maybe making some spindles or legs or something for a stool or whatever, I can have this out, and I can just put it down and push it kind of back out of the way, even with it up. I just don't put it up under the cabinet that it sits in most of the time. And so it's worked beautifully for me. And like I said, having that height difference is amazing. So anyway, let me get you some closer shots. I'll be right back. Okay, here's the back side of it. And you can see how those slots in there help with how that's sitting. I even have a couple little holes for pencils there. And here is the drawer for my smaller parts. And then, like I said, I take that drawer out. And then the bigger drawer, you can see there is a lot of gouges in there. I would say I bought 5 or 6 new. All the rest are used. That's why they're different colors, because they've been used. Here's the end. And I even made a little bracket to hold the couple of the tools. That's how it goes into the side of the lift. And here's the front. So very handy. Once in a while I have to take the light away because I might actually be swinging out farther that way, and a couple of tools might come up here pretty high, and I might have to take those out. I think I've had to a couple of times on some bigger items, but very, very easy to do and no big deal. So anyway, this is, oh, and I even put a magnetic thing here. That's for my ruler. And then you can see I have my remote control for the dust collector. So anyway, that's it. And maybe in the future I'll show some of the devices I've made for it and how I do the segmented turning and that sort of thing. But that's it. Thank you.